Why are schools underperforming?
Well, I think it's a very complicated situation, but the ultimate answer is that we haven't organized them to focus on student learning, that our schools in general don't focus and take student learning as their objective. If we did, we would worry about who's teaching in the classroom, what they're doing in the classroom, how we're organizing the schools, how we're using our funds, if the objective were to focus on student outcomes.
So how much of a factor is the amount of money spent in a given school district or a given state? How much effect does that have? Is there a relationship?
Well, if you look in the broad scale across states or within most states, we find that the amount of money spent is unrelated to what the school is adding to student achievement. What we know is that how money is spent is much more important than how much is spent. Now, that's not to say that we can't use extra money in various circumstances to really do exceptional things. It's not an argument against ever putting money into schools or that money can't make a difference. It's just that when we look across schools, we don't see that that's the dominant factor. There are other things that are much more important.
Yet you're in favor of merit pay, though.
I am, in fact, in favor of merit pay. I'm in favor of rewarding the people who are adding to the student achievement, and that they should be, in fact, rewarded so that we can keep them in the schools. We don't want our best teachers to go away from the schools.
If you were the czar of education, let's say we weren't living in a democratic society and you were in charge and we could do whatever you said, what would be like the three things that you would want to focus on to improve American education?
I would focus on good assessments of student outcomes that allowed us to track student learning over time for individual students so that we knew where learning was taking place and where it wasn't. I would focus on rewarding those who do a good job and eliminating those who aren't up to the task in our schools. And as a general rule, I would favor having more choice across schools where parents can send their children to a different school if it's not doing well. Now, that's a difficult problem here in New Mexico because you have so many isolated rural schools where it's difficult to have choice. But in the urban areas, you could certainly see that provides some of the better incentives to get parents involved in the education also.
And you've mentioned that leadership is very important, that principals, I don't want to put words in your mouth, principals are more important or have more of an impact than individual teachers?
Yeah, there's a bigger variation in the effectiveness of principals than teachers in the following sense. If we look at the gains in student learning across schools, we see that principals have a big impact on that. The amount of impact of any individual principal is about the same in terms of student achievement as for a teacher, except that it counts for the whole school and not just an individual classroom.
So an individual principal can make how much of a difference compared to a below average or average principal?
Well, it's hard to put that in easily digestible form, but it can. A good principal can move schools up several letter grades on your accountability system because they add to the learning of students and the value added to schools.
Last question for you. Is it important? Does it have any effect at all for teachers to go to a, quote, school of education as opposed to a teacher who may not have that background?
Well, as a general rule, we don't see that where somebody was trained or what course of study they had has much influence over how well they do in the classroom. Effectiveness does not seem to be based upon the background and training of people. Now, that having been said, we want our math teachers to know math and our physics teachers to know physics, and there are certain basic requirements, but this doesn't necessarily come from just going to education schools.
A lot of what you're saying seems like kind of heresy, I would think, to some teachers' unions. Do you get some pushback from them?
Well, the teachers' unions often resist any change. They like the system that they have today, and they would like to keep it and resist that change. I think what we're seeing nationally is that the teachers' unions are reevaluating how they can participate in improving the schools. It turns out that their ability to perform is dependent upon having good students, because our students are competing around the world, and our teachers unions have to be able to produce students that are competitive.
Eric Hanushek, thank you for your time.
Thank you.